Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. On this video, I'm going to show you how I made this adorable stencil painting picture of my dog Shadow. I have another one ready for my dog Hunter, and I used my Cameo to cut out a stencil out of vinyl. I used Oracal 631, but you could use any removable vinyl. And then I used an 8x8 canvas board. I really like these because they're sturdy, they're hard, you don't have to worry about poking through the canvas when you're taking your vinyl off of the canvas. But I have used a canvas wrap before and it worked, you just have to be more careful. The tools that I used for this were foam paintbrushes, a regular little paintbrush, the scraper tool, but you could easily use a credit card or a rewards card or something else to really burnish your material down. Some scissors. I actually used a rotary cutter also, and then my weeding tool. And then the supplies that I used was the Oracal 631 vinyl, a handful of little craft paints, some Mod Podge spray in flat, and then some clear acrylic sealer as well in a glossy. Now I really prefer to use the flat paints because they just work so much easier for me when I've made signs before using a glossy or a semi-gloss paint. Sometimes when you're pulling your vinyl off your stencil or your board, you'll pull some of that up with it, and that just doesn't happen so much with the flat paint. So that's what I like to use. If you want to join me, grab your things and let's start crafting. For this project, these are the colors that I plan to use. It's a black, this is espresso, this is just called brown, and warm buff. My first 2 or 3 layers though, I'm just going to use one solid color. Really all you need to do on the first 2 or 3 layers is just get this white covered up. So I'm going to just generously put this on my canvas. And just paint it on. Now you want to be careful that you don't have a lot of texture to this. You don't want it to be globby or thick. And so after you've put it on, you're going to go back over the whole thing and just kind of smooth it out. And I really like these foam brushes. You can get these very inexpensively at Walmart, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, any of those stores. And when I'm using acrylic paints, since they're water-based, I just rinse these out and reuse them. Also, this is going to go in a frame, and so I'm not too concerned about the sides. You can see that the coverage of this paint isn't very good, and so that's why I'm going to do 2 or possibly 3 coats of this color first. So I'll let this dry about 15 minutes, and then I'll put one more coat on. I'll see how it looks then, and if it needs one more after that, I'll do another one, and then we'll move on. Okay, now this is the fun layer. I'm going to use chocolate brown, brown, warm buff, and black. And on this layer, you have to work pretty quickly, and you need to have a decent amount of paint on your canvas because to blend these colors, you just have to maintain some moisture in it. So this is chocolate brown. This is just the regular brown. It's the first layer we used. Okay, I grabbed one more. This is espresso. I'm going to use this very sparingly, just little dabs, a couple of them. And then I'll wait to add the black after I've done a little blending. So I just start in the middle and work my way up and down and just keep doing that until I like it. think you might be getting a lot of glare. I'm going to turn the lights down just a little bit. And then I'm just going to put a few little streaks of black. All right, that is way too much black. Now I'm going to have to change my brush. If I were to keep using that brush, it would be very, very difficult to cover up a lot of that black that I just added on. Okay, so I'll add some more brown on. And usually you don't want it in blobs like that, but we'll make it work. And then some more espresso back on. That is much more the tone I was looking for. A super dark brown, but not just one solid color. I moved it over because I have some thick paint there and I don't want it to dry in such a thick piece of paint. So my last swipes across are very light and just to smooth out any of the globs or texture that I don't want. Here's the stencil I'll be working with. I'll cut this out on my Cricut Maker. The white box behind it was simply a representation of my canvas. I wanted to put the size of my canvas behind shadow space so that I could see what it would look like. I can go ahead and hide that now. And then you can see over here I have another dog that I'm working with. I'm ready to go ahead and click Make It. Then Continue. I'm going to use some black Oracal 631 for my stencil. So I'll click Vinyl and then make sure the fine point blade's in and we can cut. That cut pretty well, but you can see that the blade did shove around a couple of pieces and they're not exactly where they need to be. If it's small little details, don't sweat the small stuff. If it really bothers you, then later just hand cut the little piece missing and add it on. This is my second time to weed this because I forgot something very, very, very important the first time. And so as I go, I'll share with you what I did wrong. But the first thing I want to do is I want to cut away a lot of the excess. Now that I have that done, let me share with you what went wrong. I like to start on the outside, and while I'm weeding, I want to be looking at a picture of what I'm weeding. I'm doing what I would recall a reverse stencil, and the very first time I did it, I was doing a picture of my kids, and I weeded the first picture, and when I got done, I realized I weeded it like a traditional stencil, but in this case, we are covering the areas that we want to keep, and we're stenciling outside of those areas. And typically on a stencil, you do the opposite. So I'm going to have a picture in front of me, and I'm going to remember, leave the black parts I see, weed the white. So what I like to do is just start rolling it back very slowly. And as you do that, if something doesn't come up that you can see has a cut line in it, then put it back down, rub it with your weeding tool. Like, let's say this little piece wouldn't come up. I'd rub it, and then I'd try to pull up on the back side, and then I'd hold down the piece that I want to stay down, and I'd keep pulling. Then the other thing I like to do is I like to cut away, once you know it's weeded correctly, cut away the excess vinyl. Now here's what I did wrong just a few minutes ago. I accidentally let the piece I was cutting away a fairly large piece because I didn't cut around my stencil first. And the sticky side of the vinyl fell down on my stencil right here, and when I tried to get it up, no matter how hard I tried, it was pulling up pieces of my stencil. So I just really needed to start over. So that's my big caveat to you, is don't let it fall down onto your stencil. So I'm going to weed through this, and as I do, I'll fast forward. I don't think you need to watch 30 minutes of weeding. Okay, I'm going to hold this up and see if I can see anything that I missed. Oh, I see one. And then I have one piece of vinyl that I weeded that was laying on top. I'll go ahead and remove that. If you hold it up to some light and you just move it around, that helps you see the cut lines in there. I think that looks good though. When I was weeding, I saw one teeny tiny little piece that had come off that shouldn't have come off, but I had already cut that piece away, and so it was too late. Okay, it's right over here. There should be a skinny long piece right there. So if I'm really interested in putting that back, I can just hand cut out of the vinyl and put something there. So let me show you what I mean. I have this piece that I weeded off and cut away all the really messy stuff. And then the little piece that I'm missing was long and skinny and just slightly curvy. So I'm going to cut something out of this. So I filled it back in, and is it the exact shape of what came out? No, but it's good enough. Okay, so let's move on to getting this adhered to my transfer paper. This is just transparent contact paper. And I'm going to lay it down over on this side. And then I'll just rub as I pull it out. You want to try to keep this really flat. Okay, so it's kind of hard for you to see, but I'm going to use my scraper tool and just really get it nice and flat. I don't have it perfectly flat over here. I'll have to try to fix that. And I can pull the paper away from it as I go. Okay, so my contact paper wasn't quite long enough. There's still a piece right here. Make sure there's not part of your stencil on it, like that piece had some stencil on it. So I'm going to grab a new piece. Okay, and then you can overlap it. That's not going to hurt it. My iPad stopped recording because I got low on storage, so I had to move my file over to my computer, but you didn't miss much. You missed me removing this from my mat, and what I do is I turn my mat over, I hold this really flat, and I pull my mat up, and I keep moving and pulling. Otherwise, you can buckle this adhesive vinyl quite a bit. And then the other thing I waited till I got back on to show you is the transfer tape or the transfer paper isn't adhered fully everywhere because of my little lumps, and that's because I didn't do a good job of laying it down smooth before I started putting it across my image. Now all these little air bubbles in here, those really don't matter at all, but I would like to try to fix this a little bit. So I'm just going to try to slice through the top layer of the vinyl. Well, I went through the whole thing, but that's okay. And then see if I can't get that to lay down any better. Okay, so that worked for that area. And then I have it right here as well. Try not to cut my finger. I'll cut there and cut there. That just gives the vinyl that, or the transfer tape that needs to overlap, someplace to go. The rest of it looks okay. Now, I'm shoving like this. It's a better idea to pull it because when you shove, you really can kind of gouge and make those move a little bit. So, pull it instead of shoving it. One of those don't do as I do, do as I say lessons. Okay, there she is. As soon as my canvas boards are dry and ready, then I'll go ahead and remove this stencil from the backing, lay it down, and then add my white. We're ready to move on. Here's my project. Here is my reverse stencil of shadow, and then here's my board. It turned out just beautifully. In addition to putting 2 light coats of the Mod Podge spray on it, I did put a coat of a clear sealant on it. And so if you want to do that, you could use something like this. I just thought with having a glossy finish, just a thin glossy finish, that would protect the paint in case I have any issues when I'm taking off my stencil. So I'll go ahead and move this to the side. Okay, let's see how well this works. I want to go ahead and really burnish this down. And I'll do this from both the front and the back side. Okay, so rather than pulling up on my clear sheet with the stencil, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. And then I'm going to remove the backing from it. And if you can get that started and really pull back almost straight that way, and sometimes you're even pushing down with this finger on the stencil as you're removing it. But it's coming off really nicely. If part of it doesn't, and we'll see if that happens, then I'm going to lay it down, rub it hard, and then try to pull it up again. But this is coming off really nicely. Now there's a piece that's not coming up. So I'm just going to lay that down, rub on it. Okay, so it was being a little bit stubborn, and I folded this back, and finally it kind of released itself. You can see right there it's coming up, but if you just push on the white part and roll back at the same time, that helps it release. And I'm pulling with my thumbs and I'm pushing down with these fingers. That seems to be working really well. So there she is. Now I'm going to have to be really careful that I don't let her sit down too much on this until I'm happy with where she's placed. So I'm going to hold the edges kind of up, and then her face is tilted in the picture a little bit like this. And then I'm going to get over this. Hopefully my head won't be in the shot. So without scratching on the paint, and again, I did put that glossy finish on it to help protect the paint, because a matte finish paint can be marred up where you can see where it's been scraped against fairly easily. I like working with matte paint, but then I like the finish of a slightly shiny paint. Okay, so again, I'm going to take the edge of my paper and really fold it back. And I can see that my vinyl doesn't really want to stay down yet. So I'm going to hold it down with my weeding tool where I need to, kind of smooth it out. Once I get past these really small pieces, it'll get better. Okay, so I don't know if you can see those are coming up. So just push them down. There we go. And then roll your paper back. Now I'm going to try to lift this up and show you something a lot closer. So I have this piece coming up. I'm going to roll it back down, and then I'm going to press on top of the transfer tape so that I protect my actual canvas, and it came off. So that's a good trick to try. So I have it off. Now, this is canvas, it's textured. You are going to have some bleeding. You just want to be able to control that bleeding. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this nice smooth side of the contact paper and just rub this down. Now, that came up a little bit. It's pushed back down, but the edge of my contact paper got under that. So be more careful than me. Okay, that's better. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is, and you've probably seen this on sign videos, I'm going to paint a very light coat over this, knowing that part of it is probably going to be slightly bleeding under the canvas, or I'm sorry, under the vinyl. Canvas is textured, so there's going to be little gaps. But I'm going to use this brown color as my first coat. That way, when a little bit seeps in there, in the nooks and crannies of this canvas, it's brown. And it's basically the same color as what is covered up. Now I would only use matte paint to do this, because later on when you pull up this vinyl, if you use something that's glossy, glossy is just sticky, it sticks to itself. And so when you pull the vinyl up, oftentimes that glossy paint will pull off of your background in lumps also. Kind of like when you paint a wall and you're against the baseboards or the door frame, and you've used tape to tape it off, and you pull the tape off and part of the paint comes with it. That doesn't really happen when you use matte paint. I've also used chalk paint to be this first layer because it's really good at not pulling up when you pull up the vinyl. Okay, so remember all this is going to be white later on, so don't panic when I do this. But I just want to kind of seal the edges with a thin coat of this brown. Because again, once you take the vinyl off, it would mix in with the color of the background much better than white would. Now, I realize this isn't the best color. I should have picked a darker, maybe the espresso. But this would definitely be better to see a little bit of this than white. Now I want to smooth out any thick spots so that I don't see that texture after I spray paint it. So far I've had great luck at keeping the canvas texture. And that's because you do light coats of everything. Now, once this is just barely dry, I just want to wait until it's just barely dry. I'm going to go ahead and take this outside, and just like I did with my Mod Podge, I'm going to shake up the can, go outside, spray a little bit out so I make sure it's not spitting. It's getting those first pieces that might be still stuck in the tube out. And then I'll lay this probably on a vegetable can or something with something under it for the paint to fall onto. And then I'll start spraying over to the side, and I'll spray all the way across it, and I'll go past this edge, move up, go back, just keeping very, very light and quick layers of the spray paint. I'll let it just barely dry, then I'll do another coat. I would guess it's going to take 3 or 4 coats. Okay, so that's plenty dry to go outside and do my spraying. I've already done 2 light coats. My husband's home, so he's going to record this. Now, I'm going to go ahead and, you can't see it, but I'm spraying a little bit out to make sure I have any clogs or any blobs that will come out. And then I'm going to start over to the side. I'm going to spray, and then I'll go past it, and then back that way. And that's it for my 3rd coat. I finished all my painting, and it's been about an hour, and so hopefully it shows up in camera or in the video that you can see the outline of where the reverse stencil is. I'm going to start with a small piece, and the trick is letting this dry long enough that it's not tacky anymore, but not so dry that it's hard to get the stencil up. And that's going to vary depending upon your paint. So I'm just on top of a piece of the vinyl, and I'm just going to kind of pick at it and lift it up and grab it with my fingers. I think I'm to my last one, and I really want you to see that I'm not trying to scratch under this. I'm just putting my little hook thing kind of in the middle of an end of it. I'm just trying to slightly move it. And then it lifts up and I grab it. So you don't want to scratch deep with this tool at all. That looks really good. I can barely see in a few places where my reddish brown paint bled under. You might be able to see right there, that's a slightly different sheen and just a slightly different color. I can see it at the edges of several of these. And if I had not used a dark color to do that, if I would have used a coat of white first, that would have been really upsetting. That would have just bled right through. Now some people will use a clear coat of Mod Podge, something like that. I've just had better luck with using a thin layer of matte paint. So I am thrilled with how this turned out. And so tomorrow I'll take this back outside and then I'll use my spray Mod Podge and I'll give it a couple more clear coats on the top and then it's ready to display. Thanks so much for joining me. Until the next video, bye-bye.